My name is Debbie Ziegelmeyer, and I'm the Missouri MUFON State Director. I got interested in UFOs because I grew up in Arizona, in the southwestern corner of Arizona, and as a child, I wasn't all that interested in TV. I was interested in getting outside and playing. My brother and I were the only 2 out of 6 kids that have always had telescopes. So at nighttime, when most kids were in the house playing or watching TV, I was outside either with my telescope or I would crawl up on the roof of the garage. We had this large 6-foot wall with kind of a step at the beginning of it, so I could make my way across the wall, jump about a foot onto the garage, and I'd lay on the top of the garage and watch the stars. When Star Trek came out, I knew it was fantasy, but I thought there has to be something real out there. So I guess that's what got me interested in UFOs, was I'd look at the stars and I'd think that's just great that they're out there visiting. I want to do it too. Following the whole Star Trek interest, back years ago in St. Louis, they started having Star Trek reunions. So I went to all the reunions. I went to the big, I think it was the 25th anniversary of the entire original cast in Pasadena. I've met all the Star Trek characters. I've got all their autographs. And then I got to the point where I thought, I'm beyond this. I'm tired of the fantasy. There's so much reality out there. I'd always been interested in UFOs, and I'd always had UFO books. I'd sit and doodle UFOs. I just had a real fascination with it. So I got to the point where I was beyond the fantasy, and I wanted to start investigating the reality of it. And the more and more I checked into it, the more I found out was out there. So I was looking one week in a magazine, and I saw there was a MUFON meeting locally. I went to the MUFON meeting, and I was hooked immediately, and I think this was 1998. Within 2 years, I had joined MUFON, become a MUFON field investigator, and in 2009, I became the Missouri MUFON State Director. And about 3 years ago, I believe, I was asked to join the MUFON Board of Directors, at first as an interim board member, and I think it was last year, I became a permanent member, or actually a full member of the MUFON Board of Directors, Business Board of Directors. So I started out with a general interest, and the more that I found out, the more that I wanted to know. I was an independent investigator long before I started being an investigator for MUFON. So my brother, Chuck Zukowski, and I would get together 3 times a year. We would pick holiday weekends where there was a 3-day holiday, turn it into a 4-day holiday, and set out with a plan. The plan never worked. We started out one time at the San Luis Valley. From there, we decided that we spent one night there and decided to go on into Roswell, and we went up in the mountains and decided we were going to do a lookout and see if we could see something, and we ended up debunking an animal mutilation that had happened. We were in the area where the next day somebody went into the UFO museum there in Roswell, and they said there was an animal mutilation, and this animal was dropped from a large triangle-shaped craft. And we stood and looked at each other, and then I said, that didn't happen. We were there, and there was nobody else there but us. That started a whole series of events. From that one instance, I went from being an amateur investigator to a full-on professional investigator. From there, my brother and I were asked to be on a TV special, which ended up, we were on an archaeological dig. We were on Roswell Startling New Evidence in 2002, so we did an archaeological dig there at the debris site. We were asked back again in 2006 for another, I think it was a UFO Hunters episode. So that started the hands-on trace evidence investigating rather than just investigating through the internet and books. I got my more hands-on, and from there I asked to be assigned more MUFON cases. And I think at this point I'm at about 1,000 investigations that I've done. Along with becoming a field investigator for MUFON in 2000, in 2001, I became a certified scuba diver. And I thought, gee, there's so much that's happening in and around water. Somebody needs to combine these two. I found out MUFON didn't have a MUFON dive team. They had an expert in everything else. I did some research on it. At least 1 in 5 UFO sightings involves water. The Earth, 70% of the Earth is covered in water, and it's the perfect place to hide. So my interest started gearing more toward what's going on in and around the water. I was surprised at how many sightings involved things coming in and out of ponds, in and out of the ocean. There's so many sightings that there's probably as many water sightings as there are land sightings, but they're just not talked about as much. They're hid more because a lot of it is sightings that are by military and a lot of sightings by fishermen. And one of the earliest sightings was a sighting that Christopher Columbus had coming to North America. He had a UFO sighting. It was in his journal, a strange light that was bobbing up and down. So my interest is focused on the water, but as far as sightings in the state of Missouri, I think I'm interested in the craft sightings because we have a lot of strange craft that have been sighted, especially around my area. Most of the UFO sightings involved in and around water are too deep for a recreational diver to dive in. A recreational diver is limited to 130 feet. There are tech divers that have gone down as much as 400 feet average, but coming up, they're able to stay down a half an hour or so. Coming up involves an average of 5 hours of decompression before they can come back to the surface. So it's not really a good way to do an investigation when you've got about a half an hour, maybe in dark conditions and limited visibility. So what we're looking at now are investigations that involve water entry or something that's coming out of the water, some type of UFO that's come in and out of the water, or some kind of anomaly that's diveable, 130 foot or less. I'm looking at a lot of different places. Back in 1973, there were UFOs seen coming in and out of Clearwater Lake in Missouri. That's one of our dives on the list. Recently, there's been lights reported in and around the lake, and so we'd like to go back over there and have a look. We also are looking at, and when I say we, I'm referring to the MUFON dive team. MUFON does have an expert scuba diving team, and we're looking at a place in Wisconsin that I was just made aware of that has some anomalies and some activity in and around that area. I was also approached by someone who's involved in the Bosnian pyramids, and they want me to come down, go to Bosnia, and dive in these passageways underneath the pyramids. That's something also that's diveable. Whether or not safe, I'm not sure, but I'm very interested in that. So I'm looking at several projects. And so when you talk about UFOs coming in and out of the water, there's a lot of it that's coming in and out of, there's been sightings for years, Avalon Bay, which is Catalina Island in California. That's something that's really not diveable. I've been diving there, but it's not a place where you can go down 2,000, 3,000 feet and see something as a diver. So we're doing the investigation under our diving certification limits. Now what I would like to do later on, once we get more established in the public, I'm hoping that somebody will be able to come forward and give us access to an unmanned underwater vehicle. In 2000, along with everything else that started in my life in 2000, January of 2000, 4 different police departments saw a UFO in Illinois, just across the river from me. So it was Dupo, I believe it was Carondelet. There were 4 police departments, and as it went from one precinct to the next, they were reporting it. It got to Dupo, this large craft, got as far as Dupo, the Mississippi River, and then turned around. Had it come over the river, it would have come right over my house. So at that point, I focused on what was going on in my area, what was going on in Missouri, and how I could get more involved in finding out the truth about what was going on, not only in Missouri, but in the United States. In 2001, I went to a family reunion, and my brother who lives in Colorado Springs, my brother Chuck Zukowski, and I started talking about our investigations into UFOs. And it come to find out, we were running the same kind of investigations. We were doing the same thing. He was investigating Roswell, I was investigating Roswell. Although I hadn't been there, he had. So we teamed up. As far as I know, we're the only brother-sister UFO investigating team. We investigated Roswell for about 10 years. We started on different projects. And in 2009, we started getting calls about animal mutilations. The first one came to Chuck in March of 2009 in Colorado Springs. He went out and did an investigation and got kind of a rapport with the ranchers. And so when another cow mutilation would occur, the rancher would inform that rancher, or his name got known, and he became the MUFON director of animal mutilations. Well, the animal mutilations, I found out, started spreading to Missouri. In 2010 and 11, were the first mutilations. They weren't called into Missouri right away, but by default, by then, 2009, I became the state director. I ended up being the animal mutilation expert for Missouri. So what was kind of funny was that my brother and I started out together teaming up about Roswell in 2001, 2002, and now we're the animal mutilation experts just by default, and from 2 different states. So the majority of these that are being reported are going on in Colorado and going on in Missouri. So somehow, by default, we ended up teamed up again for something totally different than our expertise. And it's intriguing because we can compare notes. A lot of the commonalities that we have with the animal mutilations in Missouri are the same commonalities that he's having in Colorado. When the rancher calls us, they're not calling us because they're curious about what happened. They're more calling us because they're panicked about what happened. I talked to a rancher yesterday, and he's been a rancher for years, family rancher. He said his daddy told him that the one commonality about cows is they're going to get loose and they're going to die. And he said, that happens all the time. I've seen a lot of dead cows. I've not seen a cow die like this one. And that's what panics these poor gentlemen. And actually female, we've had 2 female ranchers that have lost cows. One female rancher last year in July lost 2 cows within 2 weeks. They're used to their cows dying. It happens from illness, but some of the strange things, there's parts that are lasered off, and the laser cut is I guess cauterized around where there isn't any bleeding, but there's no blood. There's no blood anywhere. The animals are found laying, almost placed. One of the explanations that I had from a veterinarian was, well, the cow was ready to give birth. It was a breech birth, and the breech birth killed the cow. And I said, well, wouldn't the cow have struggled? There wasn't any sign of struggle. The cow just fell over dead. Now, if a cow is in severe pain trying to give an unnatural birth, it's going to struggle. There's going to be kick marks everywhere. But it wasn't. It was just laying. We've had cows that were found. Well, this cow was found dead with part of its head missing and an udder missing. We've had cows that were found dead, the mother cow with the baby right next to it, but the mother cow was taken down. And the explanation from the police is, well, it was a predator. But you would think that the predator would take the baby that was just born, the calf, wouldn't take down an 1,100-pound cow and leave the calf there. All of these, the hide is thick on a cow. If you've ever tried to take a sample try and take a knife and cut your shoe, cut the leather on your shoe. It's very difficult to do, but these are laser cut off. These laser cuts, this has been happening since the early 70s. And we've done some research, and it hasn't been that many years since we've had portable lasers that you could take on site, certainly not in the 70s. Why? I think the big question is, who's doing this and why? Why are they taking the cows, mutilating them, and then bringing them back? Because the rancher that I just talked to yesterday said that he was missing a cow from 2 years ago. The cow just turned up missing. And he thought, well, you know, it was a young cow, a calf, maybe it got carried off by a mountain lion, maybe somebody cattle rustled him, stole his cow, and he didn't put any more mind to it. But when you bring the cow back, well, now you start the questions. And I know a lot of people think that it's the government doing it, but why would they bring the cow back and cause all the controversy? Just take the cow. Take the cow, do whatever you want, dispose of it. The rancher will think the cow was cattle rustled or something happened, but they're starting, whoever is doing this or whatever is doing this is starting the controversy. And we know that it's not a cult. For many years it was explained away as being a cult. These cows are taken, when they're dropped back, they're dropped from above. We've had impression marks. We've had impression marks in ice. We've had a cow placed on the snow, a cow placed on ice with no blood. And if you've ever cut your finger and put it on an ice cube, the blood will fill the ice cube. So why there's no blood on the ice, why there's no blood on snow, why there's no blood in the area, why some of these, there's huge laser cut holes out of these animals and there isn't any blood around. A lot of times predators won't come around for days. Sometimes they won't come around for weeks. You don't have maggots or bugs. You don't have any other kind of an animal trying to eat off of these. The rest of the herd will swing wide. They won't even go around it, or they'll be upset. Some of these ranchers find these cows because, one, the cows were circling the dead cow. Another one, the cow stampeded away from it. So the whole thing is very strange, and at this point, we don't know who or what is doing this, but that's why that's why we're doing the investigation. That's why we're doing the research. We're talking to the ranchers, and I thank them so much for having the confidence in us, to trust in us, to try and find out what's happening. If we find answers, we're more than happy to get back with all the ranchers and give them some kind of answers, because this is an expensive loss for these ranchers. The calf, I believe he said it was probably only $400 had grown up. You're talking a lot more money. Some of these cows were worth as much as $1,500. And if you have a female calf, it would have grown up and it would have had calves. And those calves would have had calves. One cow is a huge investment, and to lose it, especially in this economy, is a tragedy. When I joined MUFON, I had the gentleman who signed me up ask me a very important question. He said, "Why are you joining MUFON?" And it sounds like a simple question, but I thought about it and I said, well, I want to know the truth. I'm almost sorry I asked. There's so much more truth out there than anyone could even begin to imagine. Education is everything. What everybody needs to do is get online, watch these shows on TV that are giving the information. This information should and is available out there, but it's your right to know what is going on. I hope someday for full disclosure. I don't think it's ever going to happen in the United States. Eventually we'll know some of what's going on. Other countries are starting to release their files. There are Freedom of Information Act files that are available, the FBI website. You can go on there, and I do a lot of research there and other places. There are files available, but everybody needs to educate themselves as to what is going on, because UFOs are real. They're out there. They've been around for thousands of years. And I believe that it's not something a person should be afraid of. If we were going to be hurt by these ETs, if you want to call them that, it would have happened a long time ago. But I believe it's our right to know what's happening, what's in our skies, and what's going on around us. We need some type of disclosure. It's our right to know, and I believe that if citizens were more active in asking that this information be released, then I believe that some of this would finally get released to the public and we'd have a few answers. If you'd like more information about what's going on in the United States and across the world, you can go to MUFON.com. All the information is there. You can also go to your state, so if you're more interested about Missouri in particular, you can go to MissouriMUFON.org.